Frederick Douglass, Slave, Fighter, Freeman, is a 1959 biography of Frederick Douglass, the runaway slave turned prominent abolitionist, written by American poet and Harlem Renaissance figure Arna Bontemps. This book is regarded as one of the most definitive accounts of Douglass's life, second only to Douglass's own autobiographies. Born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey in early 1818 on Maryland's eastern shore, Douglass entered the world as a slave in Talbot County near the Chesapeake Bay. According to Douglass's writings, his birthplace was his grandmother's cabin, where his enslaved mother, Harriet Bailey, gave birth. His father was believed to be his white master, a claim supported by later accounts and documents. As was customary in many enslaved families, Douglass was separated from his mother as a child, but remained with his grandmother, Betty Bailey, until the age of 6. At that point, he was relocated to the Y House plantation. After the death of his owner at Y House, Douglass was sold to Hugh Auld in Baltimore. His time in the city was transformative, exposing him to culture and ideas that shaped his intellect. Initially, Hugh's wife, Sophia, began teaching Douglass to read and write, but this effort was soon quashed by Hugh, who believed education would encourage slaves to seek freedom. Douglass often overheard arguments between Hugh and Sophia about his education, providing him with his first insights into the conflicting ideologies of slavery and abolition. Though Sophia eventually stopped teaching him, Douglass secretly continued his education, reading whatever he could find and seeking help from white children he encountered. Douglass's determination to share his knowledge led him to teach other enslaved people to read, using the New Testament as a teaching tool. He held secret classes at church gatherings, but his efforts were discovered, and a mob of pro-slavery supporters violently disrupted the lessons, intimidating his pupils into abandoning their studies. For much of his youth, Douglass lived in relatively less brutal conditions compared to those enslaved on large plantations. This changed in 1833 when at age 15 he was sent to Edward Covey, a notorious slave breaker. Over the next year, Covey subjected Douglass to relentless physical and psychological abuse, nearly driving him to despair. However, Douglass ultimately found the strength to resist, culminating in a physical confrontation where he defended himself against Covey. This act of defiance marked a turning point, reigniting Douglass's resolve and paving the way for his eventual escape and rise as a leading voice in the abolitionist movement. After his confrontation with Edward Covey, Frederick Douglass experienced significantly less physical abuse from his oppressor, as Covey, now intimidated, avoided further altercations. In 1837, Douglass met Anna Murray, a free black woman who became his confidant and supporter. A year later, with assistance from Murray and contacts within the Underground Railroad, Douglass escaped slavery. The couple married shortly after his escape and remained together for 44 years until Anna's death. They settled in Massachusetts and adopted the surname Douglass, inspired by characters in Walter Scott's poem The Lady of the Lake. In Massachusetts, Douglass became deeply engaged with the abolitionist movement, influenced by the powerful writings and lectures of William Lloyd Garrison. Douglass regarded Garrison's newspaper, The Liberator, as second only to the Bible in importance. Douglass began attending protests and lectures, and he was eventually invited to share his experiences as a former slave. His eloquence and intellect impressed Garrison, who encouraged Douglass to lecture widely across the northern states. Douglass's reputation soared with the 1845 publication of his autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. Despite skepticism from racists who doubted that a black man could write such a sophisticated account, the book became a bestseller, undergoing multiple reprints and translations into French and Dutch. Between 1845 and 1847, Douglass toured Europe, where he continued advocating for abolition. Upon his return to the U.S., he launched his own abolitionist newspaper, the North Star. Beyond his anti-slavery work, Douglass championed women's rights, becoming the only African American to attend Elizabeth Cady Stanton's landmark Seneca Falls Convention on women's suffrage. His activism spanned decades, extending through the Civil War and Reconstruction. Douglass joined the Republican Party, then a strong advocate for civil rights and the abolition of slavery. At the 1888 Republican National Convention, he became the first African American to receive a presidential vote during a major party's roll call. The following year, President Benjamin Harrison appointed Douglass as Consul General to Haiti. Douglass passed away in 1895 at the age of 77, succumbing to a heart attack shortly after receiving a standing ovation at a women's rights conference. Frederick Douglass, slave, fighter, freeman, provides a detailed and captivating account of one of America's most remarkable historical figures. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe. Thank you.